we are sort of in this like transformation right now where there is a bigger focus on like how can you actually lead and be the person that you want to be at the same time. And that was my experience, was it actually felt very disjointed from who I was, but I had to like behave in a certain way to actually be taken seriously. And that could be incredibly alienating, but also sometimes you don't yield the same results. Like there's a lot of research behind the fact that, you know, women who behave exactly the same way as men, you'll be branded as kind of aggressive. You know, there's an inverse relationship with likability in the corporate world, the more kind of direct you are. And so you're constantly kind of walking this tightrope where you're trying to be, you know, assertive and speak your mind, but you're also trying not to be penalized for that at the same time. Yeah.
Hi, Yolanda. It's great to have you here today. Welcome to the Kelly Lindberg podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for staying up late, because it's a little bit later for you. You're in Singapore, isn't it?
Yes, I am. It's just pre-dinner time. Yeah.
It's not the middle of the night.
No.
So I'd love for you to give a little bit of an intro as to why we've invited you on the podcast today, some of the things that we're talking about. I'm really looking forward to delving into your backstory, what got you to Singapore, because for those that are listening, we're probably thinking, she doesn't sound like she's from Singapore. So maybe over to you and give a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm born and raised in Toronto, Canada. I'm kind of the kind of classic kid of immigrants. My family are from a little island off the coast of South America called Trinidad and Tobago, or two islands, Trinidad and Tobago.
Nice.
I think I'm someone that like always wanted to have an adventurous kind of global career, but I had no idea how I was going to do that. You know, had no real plan. I didn't know anyone who had done that. But it's definitely something I've kind of channeled through my career. So have lived and worked now in about 10 different countries across kind of the UK, Europe. I spent 3 years in Sub-Saharan Africa, and then now I've been based out of Singapore and kind of working across the Asia Pacific region. Today we're here chatting a little bit about, you know, my own journey. I think from, you know, working in big tech to founding my own company to really moving towards more kind of purpose-driven work. So I'm really happy to be chatting with you today.
Brilliant. So let's start with what it is that you're working on right now. I think let's start with that, and then we can pinpoint backwards the points to that.
Yeah, happy to dig into that. So I am the founder and CEO of Uncommon. Uncommon is a private professional network for women in established leadership positions. This is really born out of my own experience as a female leader. I found it incredibly isolating once you get to more senior positions to actually connect with people who really understood some of the unique challenges that you face as a female leader, and kind of build a little bit of our own club, our own playbook for how we move forward. It began as a dinner series for women in Singapore, and it kind of grew from there. So we offer everything from kind of a peer cohort learning, so you get your kind of personal advisory board that's led by an executive coach to really help you kind of delve deeper. Then we run a series of kind of learning and development workshops and community events for from everything from kind of dinner series to industry huddles to one-on-one matching. Yeah.
So when you first had your first dinner, did you always have the idea that you wanted to take it to this level?
I think I always had like the broad idea that I wanted to launch my own business. I had worked for kind of 3 really fast-growing tech companies at early stages of their growth, but I knew I wanted to do it for myself. When I started the dinner, I had no idea though. It was really kind of born out of my own need that I found kind of leadership very isolating, and I didn't have a space where I could kind of talk really candidly about some of the challenges I was facing, and kind of let down that guard a little bit. And so when I started the dinner, I had no idea what it would kind of turn into, but it was really seeing that traction, seeing that you know, the repeat customers kind of come back, and they weren't really customers; they were just attendees. That I thought that maybe there was something there.
And so how does it work? Does the attendee, they pay for it, or is it something that corporate organizations would get you in to support the female leadership team? Because it's female driven, I think. Is that right? It's all female.
Yeah. At the moment, it's a focus on women. Yeah, so currently we started off with really being focused on individuals paying themselves. Now, I think now that we've been around for more than a year, we have a bit of a track record. We are working with corporate partners as well, who will kind of send us their kind of director level or VP level female leaders. Yeah.
To give them that platform and the space, I guess, for them to come and share, what's working, what isn't working. How does the format work for you?
Yeah, so how it's also, I think, about kind of outsourcing that learning and development, and also not every company can kind of turn around and hire a bunch of other more diverse leadership team. That takes time, but I think that they're able to kind of drive retention by ensuring that some of their underrepresented leadership team can have that kind of safe space to go to, can feel a little bit less isolated as well. Yeah.
Is the reason, because I've not spent time in the corporate world, I only know the entrepreneurial space. So I really love the conversations where I'm educated on what it's like actually going through the corporate space, and you were particularly in the sort of the tech-driven spaces of the likes of Uber, Deliveroo, like all kind of that space. Is it that it's all male-driven, or is it tech especially attracts men, or and what was that sort of journey like for you?
Yeah, great question. I definitely think there's an element of tech being incredibly male-driven, but I see this across, we're actually industry agnostic. So I see this with women in finance, with women in law, in shipping, in all sorts of industries. In general, you kind of, in a lot of markets, you'll see a 50-50 split at entry level, but by the time you get to more senior leadership, that number is less than 10%. So, and you see this across most industries. For my own personal journey, I was often one of the few female leaders in my role, and for instance, in some roles I was the only female country manager, I think, out of 40 countries that we were in, and there's different approaches to it. For me, it was a lot of like, okay, how am I going to out-alpha all of these alpha males, which wasn't necessarily my actually authentic way of leading. And I think we are sort of in this transformation right now where there is a bigger focus on how can you actually lead and be the person that you want to be at the same time. And that was my experience, was it actually felt very disjointed from who I was, but I had to behave in a certain way to actually be taken seriously. And that could be incredibly alienating, but also sometimes you don't yield the same results. There's a lot of research behind the fact that women who behave exactly the same way as men, you'll be branded as kind of aggressive. There's an inverse relationship with likability in the corporate world, the more kind of direct you are. And so you're constantly kind of walking this tightrope where you're trying to be assertive and speak your mind, but you're also trying not to be penalized for that at the same time. Yeah.
If someone's listening to this, because it's all things that I've heard, but I've never been privy to it myself, being in that space. What would your advice be if you were mentoring someone that they were in that sort of position of you? How do you authentically keep building your personal brand without you? I say be authentic to your personal brand, but not let the stereotypical, I can't be like this, or I need to be more like this. How would you mentor someone through that process?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So firstly, I think it's about choosing environments and cultures that are really right for you. And I think that there are the companies that are really great at attracting diverse talent, that they have thought about this kind of with intent. Then secondly, it's about having kind of the confidence. I think a lot of it actually has to do with that sort of inner work in yourself, and you know, in my case, I think there is this element of insecurity, and that you have to kind of show up like somebody else, and maybe that is a response to kind of feeling like you don't belong. But I think if you can feel like I understood from a very young age that if I was going to achieve all the things I wanted to achieve, I was going to have to get used to the fact that I'm going to walk into rooms where nobody looks like me, where nobody has my life experience, but my voice still matters. I still belong there. And so learning to kind of belong to yourself is, I think, and this is something like we work on a lot at Uncommon, is a really key factor. Then there's also, like, you know, the kind of tips and tricks side of things, like, you know, when you do get feedback, the more practical side, when you do get feedback, for instance, that, you know, I've had a performance review that said I was like not assertive enough, but also too aggressive. and so, you know, like kind of grounding that. Yeah, I know, you're just sort of like, okay, thank you. But grounding that and being like, okay, well, too aggressive compared to whom? Am I too aggressive compared to this person on the team? Am I too aggressive, you know, or not assertive enough? You need to kind of benchmark it and ask for those specific examples, because I think forcing people to kind of think about it in comparison to other people on the team can help as well. Knowing what your boundaries are, like how you're willing to behave and how you're not willing to behave, and assessing organizations kind of based on that as well.
I really like that tip that you give. Ask for specific examples, and I do think that that's in any space that you're working in. Even if you were an entrepreneur, you know, asking a client, why didn't you want to go ahead with it, or what was it that put you off, or is there anything I can help with? Because getting that feedback is only going to help you grow as a person, but grow in business as well. A question there I had is, it's again the entrepreneur versus the corporate. One of the things that you would do if you were uncomfortable or learning is hire a mentor or a coach. Is that something that was that you did in the corporate career, or that was supported? Because I know that this is kind of what you're doing now to support that, but was that there for you, or was it not, which is why you've decided to do it?
Yes, that's exactly why. I did work with a coach in my last role, and that I just saw how it really helped me to kind of work through and clarify like some of the challenges I had. But it was also so prohibitive in pricing for so many people, and it actually means that, okay, you can only get that level of support when you're in this, like, maybe your company sponsors it, or you're in this very senior role. And actually we see the biggest drop off in most markets in women in their careers are their 30s. And so if we're trying to, you know, live in a world where women and other underrepresented groups, you know, really make more decisions and are part of more decisions, then we need to kind of start a little bit earlier. And so a big part of what we do is also democratizing access to really top level leadership coaching before women have kind of dropped off the pipeline.
Because normally when I see people go through the transition, when I'm working with clients, they tend to be sort of late 30s or in their 40s, because they're like, right, you know what, I've had enough, I'm leaving the corporate space. Whereas I suppose if you can get them the support in their early 30s, it will get them through the next part of the next evolution of their career and their brand of I guess of who they're going to be. But that was a nice sort of tie-in to one of my questions, which was, what can companies do to do it? So yeah, so I think one of the things that companies can do is get a mentor or a coach in for the team, but earlier than the sort of the more senior level.
Yeah, there's so much that companies can do. I think it starts not from these kind of band-aid solutions like having an unconscious bias training on International Women's Day. It's really about looking holistically, like end to end, from recruitment till when somebody churns, and almost approaching it like in tech we talk about like a customer life cycle where you map out all of the touch points throughout the customer journey. Well, you have to think of it, your employees, like your customers, and how do you map out all of those touch points and actually think of those touch points with a broader lens of you know, what do those touch points look like for women? What do they look like for trans people? What do, you know, and looking at are all of those touch points actually taking into consideration that level of inclusivity? So, for instance, like a big challenge I see with a lot of companies is that they don't, like, as soon as somebody you know, is pregnant, which is not all women, you know, want to have families, but like it is still a life stage that a lot of women go through. And like having policies around that, you know, what does promotion look like when somebody is pregnant or on mat leave? There's so little thought around that, and women kind of become an afterthought. But we just kind of need to normalize the touch points that or kind of normal experiences for women. We need to kind of normalize that in the workplace, because many workplaces were kind of designed before women were ever in the workplace.
Is it something that you're looking at doing with Uncommon at the moment? It's supporting the individual and supporting in a community. Do you have that extension or the potential to go into organizations and say, right, we can come and consult on this and support you through the next steps?
Yeah, that's definitely on you know, in terms of my bigger vision. That to me is you know, the bigger piece of the puzzle, because of course a lot of these challenges are structural, and they have you know, barely inched forward in you know, when you look at it from sort of a data standpoint, whether that's gender pay gap or the leadership gap, you know, it hasn't been the fastest of progress. So definitely kind of working on a systemic level is really important. But to me, a lot of those big changes happen when you have more women represented at the table and really making those decisions and giving that viewpoint and using their voices. So kind of thinking of, okay, how do we actually get more women making those decisions who can also help to facilitate those really big structural changes that need to happen.
What have been some of the success stories then that have come from the women coming to the, you know, your dinners, then being part of the community, that had you not been there, they wouldn't have achieved or got through? Is there some of the things that you can share?
Yeah, so one of the advantages of being in a peer cohort that is vetted, so everybody is, you know, owning budgets, leading teams, kind of in an established place in their career, is this element of empathy, that you suddenly realize that you compare how you feel on the inside with how everybody looks on the outside. So you get this great lens of like, wow, I'm actually not alone. And from that empathy really comes confidence, is that you're realizing I'm not the only person who's struggling. I can go for these things. And with confidence comes like higher salaries, comes more promotions, and comes, you know, this sense of feeling kind of supported and empowered to make those really bold, audacious moves in your career. And so that's what I've kind of witnessed across the community is the impact of actually being able to not be on this island.
Because I think is what you're doing is, as much as you've been through the corporate journey and you've stepped out and now started Uncommon and your own business, that's not what the answer is for everyone. And it's also about making sure that, you know, there is very much a space for senior women within organizations, rather than the frustrations of going, I've had enough of this and I'm going to go and do it on my own. There's so much that they can bring to the table, so to speak, of support, but growth and knowledge and you'll know that more than anything else. So what are some of the ways that women can keep going in this space? You know, joining your sort of community, but any other suggestions that you would sort of say?
Yeah, in terms of staying on that track, I think that there is kind of a mindset shift that I see women who like keep progressing in male dominated industries. One is just stopping to be apologetic and ask for permission for everything. I see a lot of that, like just partially because of the way women are socialized, but there's this tendency to like be sorry that you're pregnant, or be sorry that that you're not taking on all this additional work. And or planning
this,
or planning the office Christmas party, which like has no promotable kind of value or anything like that. So I think those that do move forward have become really great, and not just sort of defaulting and being kind of apologetic, and that's something I see a lot of in particularly in this region in Asia Pacific, and so kind of learning to kind of take back that power is really important, I would say, and also just having a strong network. I think women, particularly women in these senior leadership positions, have far weaker in terms of kind of the breadth, in terms of the strength of their network. This is data from LinkedIn, but they have these. The boys' club has existed for centuries, but we don't have that same sort of like power exchange, or that sense of like I can go to these people and they're going to kind of open doors and create opportunities for me. So we wanted to kind of create that with Uncommon, and it's so important the more senior you get to really have like a solid network.
So you've started this in Singapore, and it's in-person connections. What about, is there the steps to take it global? Like, where does it go next? Because I know you've just said you've rounded up, you've finished one round of funding. Is that right?
We're not fully finished. We're not finished yet, but we will be closing it quite soon. Yeah.
Awesome. So what's the next steps? Like, can you make this global? Is that where it's going?
Definitely. Singapore is like a fantastic market to test something out. It's a small market, but yeah, it's like just really great for us to iron things out, learn a lot. That first year of a startup journey. We definitely have ambitions to be expanding for there's. I really believe that women are kind of the largest underserved working population, and so how can we address their needs and really build products for them that are where they're really a feature and not a bug. And so yeah, definitely we already do have a lot of members outside of Singapore. We do have a virtual membership as well. So a lot of our core sessions, a lot of our core coaching sessions are done virtually, and that's something we really see our members actually want, is that to be a leader in this kind of globalized world, you really do need a solid international network. When you're in Dubai for business, it's great to be able to tap into and have dinner with like incredible people who can also help to unlock opportunities. So that's really the direction that we're headed in as well.
What were some of the experiences that you learned from corporate that have actually really benefited you into the entrepreneurial space?
Oh, so many. I think I was really lucky to have been in these roles, which gave me a lot of responsibility, but also I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned so much from that. Firstly, I would say, having an incredible team in place will, and really taking the time to get the right people in place is so key. Sometimes when you're in a startup, you just want a body so that you can take some work off your plate. But like, I think learning to kind of resist that temptation and really get, like just the top team in place, and that doesn't necessarily mean like someone's incredible on paper, but someone with the right attitude, who's willing to kind of go the extra mile, like that will, and you can adapt, because there's so much of like being in a startup is also knowing how to adapt, and so that's definitely a learning I took with me. Focus is another big one. You know, sometimes the whole team or your investors can pull you in so many different directions. But you have limited resource and limited time, and really understanding like what the nice to haves are and what the kind of mission critical are is really important. And then lastly, really thinking through the lens of, and this is something I learned at Uber, really thinking through the lens of return on effort. You've got to kind of be really ruthless in your prioritization, and so thinking about everything like, you know, how much effort is going to go into this and how much return is going to go into this, and sort of working back from there.
Have you ever read the book Effortless?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, it could be one that you might find quite interesting if that's something that's resonated with you and you've brought that to the next part of your journey and business journey. I think his name is Greg McKeown. He was also the author of Essentialism, but I really enjoyed. Yeah, I really enjoyed his book Effortless, because it was about, well, how can we do something but do it really well once, but then we don't need to do it again. And it's not, he was just about educating people on, or educating on the mindset that it's not about being lazy. It's about that return on investment, I guess, very well put, that how can you make the most of it?
Yeah, that's definitely something I think I carried with me throughout, you know, all my schooling and everything. I think people maybe were somewhat frustrated with me. I was never the hardest worker, but I was definitely the smartest worker. And I remember I went to Oxford for grad school, and people would be so frustrated because I'd never, you know, do all the readings, but I would only do the ones that we really needed to know or were on the exam. And they'd always be frustrated. I'd be like in London at a party and then still finish top of my class. But I think that's such an important skill to have, is just really knowing how to work smart, especially as an entrepreneur. It's not about putting in the most hours. I still, you know, set a lot of boundaries around that. I know that it's a marathon and not a sprint. And yeah.
It's probably a lot of people are guilty of that. There has been a shift, I think. You know, I've been 20 years in business. So, you know, in the past 4 or 5 years, I think there has been much more a shift on, you know, look after yourself. You know, it's not worth putting, you know, all the hours in to you know, damage your mental health and your well-being and everything to do with that. How supportive do you think organizations are? Have you seen, is it just me, or you've seen the shift in what companies are doing with that as well?
I've seen a mixed review, to be honest. I think it's not I think everyone's got kind of a well-being program, but I think it's not as simple as just like giving your employees like a yoga membership or something, you know, but then kind of overworking them and understaffing your team and expecting the same results. So I've seen some of that, like where it's kind of like, okay, we do well-being stuff, but actually it needs to be kind of built into to the culture. I also just think it's, you know, in the world of kind of quiet quitting, and with the pandemic, there was a lot of competition for talent, at least in the region that I work in. You know, there's and in the sectors I work in startups, it's very competitive for talent. So I also just think, like, to the credit maybe of Gen Z is that they are just willing to take less of what maybe you know, my generation or earlier generations were willing to or could get away with. Like, I think about, you know, I finished uni like just after the financial crisis, and like everybody was doing like unpaid internships, and it was you'd be grinding until, you know, 2 a.m. and that I don't think you can get away with anymore, because it's just not the demand for that. But I think in a post-financial crisis world, there kind of was. Yeah.
I think that's really the aspect, and I think now a lot of I don't know in the tech space, but certainly in a lot of industries with the remote working that COVID has sort of brought, people are now actually going, well, if you don't give me the option to work from home X amount of days, I'm not taking the job.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's been a big shift in that space,
Yeah.
but possibly from your perspective, there needs to be a lot more than introducing a well-being program or let me develop a, even just the work from home. Like, it needs to be so much more than that to develop a more sustainable, effortless lifestyle, I think, for both parties.
Yeah, definitely. And even like with my team, we're kind of thinking about, I do think we're going through one of the biggest shifts in, whatever you want to call it, though, the world of work, the future of work, that we've seen really since the Industrial Revolution. And so, there's a lot of opportunity to kind of rewrite that and define that. And even for us as a team, we're thinking, okay, we want to be at the cusp of the future of work. A lot of my team, work out of Thailand, out of Indonesia, and it is more than just, we all are on Zoom now and we're doing the same things we were doing in an office. It's actually, okay, what does flexibility look like? And also, majority of my team are women. Like, how do we actually design a workplace that that's really conducive to women and normalizes a lot of the experiences of women? And so that's something, a work in process that we're looking at as well.
Do you think that the whole work from home culture is remote working is a good thing? Or do you think that it's something that, no, we need to get back into more of that sort of office environment?
I think that it comes with challenges. I can say that. But I think that it is a good thing. I think that firstly, it gives you access to like talent, that's maybe outside of your market. And that's pretty incredible, particularly as a startup founder, with building a team. So that's fantastic. I think that moving away from just kind of counting hours and presenteeism, I think that's a good thing. I don't think we just need to kind of waste people's hours or have them be sitting in the office kind of, trying to show face and be there. But the flip side of that is, there's so many great things that come from being together in the same space of, how you build trust in a team. Some things can just like quickly be resolved. If there's any friction in the team, like I find that can be quite tricky, is like actually diffusing that is harder. Like sometimes if, you don't see eye to eye with someone on something, you can just have a quick conversation and, it's off the table. But sometimes if you're remote, you have to talk over Slack, or you've got, there's just those moments, and that sort of cohesion. I think we don't fully have the tools quite yet to replace those in-person moments. And so I think there are a lot of examples of companies who are doing it well, who maybe have been remote for a very long time. But I think that it's not as simple as like, okay, we've moved all our in-person meetings to Zoom. We've got to think about actually how do we work best. It's not like, for instance, with my team, we might not, like, is it really useful for everybody to get on Zoom and brainstorm? Or is it better that we all in the next 48 hours put our ideas onto a working doc and then get on a call for 15 minutes actually to decide on what we want to do? Or so there's just like changing your actual work practices that I think aren't necessarily fully thought through yet.
I've seen a big movement in the personal development world when I've listened to podcasts, and a lot of the companies or people that own the businesses in that space are saying to their employees, the holidays don't exist. You can take as many or as little as you want. And they're really putting the onus on, like, I'd never heard this before. And then I heard it in a few podcasts and we're like, yeah, we don't give our team any holidays. It's up to them. If they want to take 9 weeks, they can take 9 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Have you heard this as well?
Yeah, I have. A lot of tech companies actually have these policies, but there's actually a lot of research behind the fact that people end up taking less. Because, so people take less because unless it's really modeled by senior leadership that they're actually, taking that time off, then it ends up that if it's not a set allocation, you don't actually feel like you have it. And so every every week that you take off, every day you take off is like, is kind of like taking you into a negative balance. Whereas if you think of it as like, oh, kind of from abundance, like, okay, I have these 20 days or 25 days or whatever, whatever it is, then you feel like, oh, that's like credit I have that I need to use before the end of the year. And so it's kind of a psychological difference when it's like, oh, it's technically unlimited, but you don't have this kind of like credit that you're kind of using in a way.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because I remember years ago, as when I used to be cabin crew, that was my transition, and that's what brought me to the Middle East was a job with Emirates Airline. But one of the things that I used to come across a lot was crew would be like, "Oh, I'm taking a sick day." It was very easy in the old days to take a sick day as crew. You would just call and you would press 1 or 2, and you didn't even have to speak to anyone. It was that simple. So people used to say to me, oh, I've got 25 sick days or 10 sick days or whatever it is, I'm entitled to them. And I think the thing that always bothered me a little bit was the entitlement to having them, so you take them. And I always thought then it was quite interesting that in our group of people that had joined Emirates at that particular time, only 2 of us got promoted because everyone else had super extended sick days. So I get the balance of where it's the negative, the negative that, if you don't have them, then there is that feeling. But then there's also a group of people out there that are like, well, I'm totally entitled to these and I'm just going to take them because I feel like I need to take them.
For sure. Yeah. With 6 days. Yeah. I've definitely seen that, that element. And I find it like, I understand maybe why some markets have like kind of allocated sick days, but I think it is something different than a vacation. Yeah, where it's like you want to be able to plan. But I totally, I mean, in Singapore you have 14 days, and I remember at one of the companies I worked for, we kind of pulled the data across the region, and I think that like people took like 5x sick days in Singapore than they did in our other markets, and we saw like on rainy days and on Mondays and Fridays, we had like a way higher incidence of sick days. Like, yeah, so this is a challenge area, I think, like kind of out of my personal comfort zone. I think I initially, we just ran off of referrals. We had like our inner circle of members, and then they would refer other members, and it kind of grew organically like that. In terms of what we do, so a lot of kind of visibility pieces, and I've had to kind of step into my own visibility, my own brand as a founder, and my entire team will probably say that I really don't like, or it's not that I don't like, but I had to let go of like a certain level of perfectionism on personal brand, like, oh, I would write these things for LinkedIn and then not post them, or get really uncomfortable doing interviews. So I think building that muscle, actually, because I do think it's actually easier to build a personal brand as a founder initially, and then kind of build your company brand as well. We kind of look at the uncommon woman, and we look at, okay, where does she exist? Like who is she? Where does she work out? What does she do in her free time? And from that, we kind of build a bit of a strategy around that, whether that's through socials, whether that's through partnerships, whether that's hitting her at her company. So all of these kind of channels have been really great for us. We are also kind of building out more content marketing, establishing our thought leadership as a brand as well. So that's all been kind of part of what we do.
So how can people find out about you? On your LinkedIn, on the post that hopefully you're going to post, and how can they find out about Uncommon? Where is the best place to reach out to you and the team?
Yeah, so to reach out to me and the team would be going to www.𝗕𝗿Uncommon.com, so 𝗕𝗿Uncommon.com/apply. For me, the best place to reach me is on my LinkedIn, and we can probably share that after.
I'll put that all in the notes. Yeah, absolutely. I've really loved, learning more about the space and, supporting and empowering women through this sort of, I guess, what would you call it? Not the next evolution, the next journey, or what do you call it in this space?
Yeah, we really call it, I guess the not so much the next generation. I would say we're really looking to kind of transform leadership itself, and so that's kind of that phase, is that we want to be those kind of captains of the ship that is this monumental shift in kind of leadership in the future of work, and we're hoping to bring along a lot of incredible women with us.
And doing it unapologetically. That was one of the
Exactly.
words that I wrote down, and I thought I really like that terminology. So awesome! Thank you so much for being part of the show. It was great to talk to you, and look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.